Envision, if you dare, two co-workers, isolated in the expansive corridors of a museum at the witching hour. Their names are Jake and Lisa, the keepers of ancient tales, the watchmen of the hushed art halls. They hold the responsibility of the museum's graveyard shift, a task that's typically serene, monotonous, and steeped in the gentle murmurs of antiquity. However, on this particular night, the resonance of the ages seems a bit more assertive, more pressing, more potent. Jake, a seasoned crusader of the Night Watch, is a towering, sturdy man with a quick laugh that reverberates off the cold marble floors. His eyes, though, carry a trace of prudence, a sprinkle of vigilance. He has witnessed inexplicable occurrences within these walls. Lisa, conversely, is a novice to the Twilight regimen. Vivacious and brimming with zeal, she's keen to validate her mettle. Yet beneath her fervor there's a quiver of anxiety. The museum after sundown is a different entity, its shadows appearing to shift and move independently, its silence a shroud that seems to stifle even her own heartbeat. Cold drafts sweep through the hallways, sending chills down their spines. As they initiate their shift, they traverse the known routes, their footfalls resounding in the cavernous expanse. The habitual quiet of the museum is, however, punctuated by a series of peculiar sounds, a rustle here, a creak there, a faint murmur that might merely be the wind, or perhaps something more. Objects in display cases shift on their own, casting eerie shadows that dance on the walls. Each noise, each movement seems to heighten the uncanny atmosphere, causing their skin to crawl with discomfort. The museum, once a zone of enlightenment and revelation, now appears to conceal a disconcerting enigma. Jake and Lisa exchange apprehensive looks, their customary chatter substituted by a palpable silence. There's an unsettling sensation in the air, a sense of foreboding that seems to seep into the very stone of the museum. As they plunge deeper into the museum, the eerie quiet is shattered by an abrupt, bone-chilling sound. As they venture deeper into the museum, they notice the temperature dropping inexplicably. The air felt heavy, almost as if it was weighing them down. Jake and Lisa's breaths became visible, puffing out in small clouds in the frigid air. The once familiar museum was beginning to feel alien, its shifting shadows and chilling drafts turning it into a labyrinth of dread. Out of the corner of their eyes they saw shadows darting and dancing, playing tricks on their minds. They turned sharply, trying to catch a glimpse of the elusive specters, but found nothing but the cold, lifeless exhibits staring back at them. A sudden cold draft swept through the museum, carrying with it an unearthly chill. The source of the draft was nowhere to be found, adding another layer to the mystery. The draft seemed to be a phantom itself, originating from nowhere and disappearing into the void. It was as if the museum was breathing, inhaling and exhaling ghostly gusts of wind. Adding to the growing eeriness, objects within the museum started moving on their own. A display of ancient coins rattled in their case, a suit of armor tilted its helmet, a painting seemed to shift in its frame. Each movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to send shivers down their spines. The museum was not just eerie, it was alive. As Jake and Lisa stood in the heart of the museum, they realized they were not alone. They were trapped in a chilling dance with the phantoms of history, their only escape being to unravel the mystery of the museum's nocturnal life. In the dead of night, the exhibits seemed to take on a life of their own. Jake and Lisa, two diligent co-workers, found themselves surrounded by the eerie silence of the museum, their only company being the lifeless exhibits. The shadows cast by the dim moonlight filtering through the windows seemed to breathe an uncanny life into the displays. They laughed it off, attributing the weird sensations to the late hour and their overworked minds. Yet, as the night wore on, the museum seemed to evolve into a different entity. Jake noticed a peculiar shift in the armor of a medieval knight, a change so slight it could easily be dismissed as a trick of light. Lisa, on the other hand, felt a chill run down her spine as she thought she saw the eyes of an ancient Egyptian statue follow her. They shared these observations, their laughter a bit more forced, their glances a tad more worried. The night took a turn towards the truly unsettling. The prehistoric dinosaur skeletons seemed to adopt a more menacing posture. The paintings of historic battles seemed to echo the cries and chaos of the battlefield. The harmless fluttering of the moth display transformed into a disquieting, frantic dance. The museum was no longer a sanctuary of knowledge and history, it had morphed into a dwelling of dread and horror. Their initial amusement now replaced with fear, Jake and Lisa couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. As the night grew darker, so did their apprehensions. The exhibits, once familiar and safe, now seemed like grotesque parodies of their former selves. Jake and Lisa were no longer in a museum. They were trapped in a haunted house of historical horrors. Their fear was not baseless. The museum was stirring, whispering tales of terror in their ears. The exhibits were not just exhibits anymore, they bore an uncanny semblance of life, a life that was not benevolent. Suddenly a loud crash echoed through the halls, followed by a sinister silence. The night had just begun, and Jake and Lisa were in the heart of the horror. The exhibits had stirred, and the museum was wide awake. As fear gripped their hearts, they realized that they were not alone. The museum, once a sanctuary of knowledge and history, was now a twisted labyrinth of terror. Jake and Lisa, two ordinary co-workers, found themselves trapped in a nightmare that was far from ordinary. They tried to escape, to flee from the horror that had come alive around them, but the exhibits, once silent and immobile, were now animated with an eerie life of their own. The once benign artifacts were now the hunters, and Jake and Lisa the hunted. The museum had become a predator's den, and they were the prey. The ancient warrior statue, armed with a spear, moved with a grace that belied its stone form. The stuffed tiger, once a symbol of nature's majesty, now roared with a ferocity that echoed through the hallowed halls. The exhibits, each with their own terrifying life, blocked every path, every escape route that Jake and Lisa could think of. They found themselves chased through the museum, their hearts pounding like war drums in their chests. Every corner they turned, every room they entered was a potential trap. The exhibits were relentless, pursuing them with a cold, calculated determination that sent chills down their spines. In a desperate bid for survival, they managed to find a hiding place. A dark corner, a forgotten nook in the vast museum, provided them a brief respite from the relentless chase. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, their bodies trembling with fear and exhaustion. But they knew they had to keep going, had to find a way to escape this living nightmare. They huddled together, trying to come up with a plan. Their minds raced, seeking a solution, a way out, but the museum was a maze, a puzzle box of horror, and they were trapped inside. They could hear the soft, menacing whispers of the exhibits, growing louder with each passing minute. The whispers were a chilling reminder of their predicament, a grim soundtrack to their terror. As the whispers grew louder, so did their fear. The chase had begun, and they were far from safe. The exhibits were not just alive, they had a sinister intention. As the clock struck midnight, Jake and Lisa found themselves plunged into a world of the uncanny. The museum exhibits, once familiar and benign, had morphed into malevolent beings, their sole intent to ensnare the two coworkers within the museum's stone walls for eternity. Their suspicions were confirmed when they discovered an old parchment, dusty and yellowed with age. The words inscribed on it sent shivers down their spines. It spoke of an ancient curse, one that trapped the souls of the living within the museum, forever doomed to wander its eerie halls. The exhibits, it seemed, were the cursed souls of the past, trapped in an endless loop of time, desperate for freedom. The realization was a chilling one. The exhibits were not just animated objects but tormented souls yearning for release. And Jake and Lisa were their chosen vessels, but surrender was not an option. The duo decided to fight back, to break the cycle of torment that had held the museum in its grip for centuries. Their plan was to outsmart the exhibits. They had to find the source of the curse and break it. The museum was a labyrinth, but they knew its every nook and cranny. They were custodians of its secrets, and they were confident they could use this knowledge to their advantage. Time was of the essence. The exhibits were growing restless, their malevolence intensifying with each passing moment. Jake and Lisa had to act fast. They split up, each heading in a different direction, their hearts pounding with fear and determination. As they delved deeper into the museum, they could feel the exhibits watching them, their silent eyes tracking their every move. As they moved, the museum seemed to come alive around them, the air thick with the anticipation of the chase. The exhibits were closing in, their sinister intentions clear. The duo had a tough road ahead. They had to outwit the exhibits, break the curse, and escape the museum before they became its next victims. The ancient suit of armor that had been silently standing in the corner suddenly sprang to life. In the heart of danger, Jake and Lisa stood their ground. Their hearts pounded like war drums in their chests, the echoing beats a grim soundtrack to the horror unfolding around them. It was as though they were in a twisted carnival, where the exhibits they had once admired were now the monsters of their nightmares. They had a mission, a final desperate bid for survival. They had to deactivate the curse that had breathed life into these inanimate objects. The artifact, the source of this chaos, was within their reach. It lay there, an innocuous piece of history that held a power beyond their comprehension. Running against time, they moved as one, darting between the shadows, avoiding the vigilant eyes of the animated exhibits. They were like predators in this haunting game, their once familiar territory turned into a hunting ground. But Jake and Lisa, they were survivors. They had to be. The museum, their sanctuary, had become a battlefield, and they were its unwilling soldiers. The artifact was close now. They could see it gleaming under the dim light, its surface etched with ancient symbols. It was almost mocking in its silence, a stark contrast to the havoc it had unleashed. But Jake and Lisa were not deterred. Their resolve was ironclad. They had to end this nightmare. They reached out, their fingers inching closer to the artifact. It was a moment of suspended animation, the calm before the storm. Time seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the climax of this terrifying tale. They could feel the electrifying tension in the air, the anticipation of their impending action. And then, just as they were about to touch the artifact, the universe conspired against them. The lights flickered, once, twice, and then everything went pitch black. It was as if the world was holding its breath, plunging into an abyss of uncertainty. The silence was deafening, the darkness consuming. Their fate was left hanging in the balance. What happens next, only time will tell. Just as they were about to touch the artifact, the lights went out, and everything went pitch black.